Today's a special day because I'm living out my lifelong dream of becoming an elf. It's time for a history lesson. The year is 1966. And then, 43 years later, the year was 2009, and I watched the brand new Star Trek reboot, a supposedly fresh and modern interpretation of the origin story of the original characters, but now with a darker, funny, sexier spin on it. And it wasn't until this year, almost a decade later, I found out for myself what that corny 60s original series was all about. And what I ultimately learned was, did Star Trek really need a funny but darker and sexier spin when it already was all that to begin with? But better? I mean, yes, it's corny. Almost all the time. It's really corny. It's very, very corny. Corny is just the right word to describe it. Yet it's corny with some real humanity to it. And it made me view the newest movies with a fresh perspective that unfortunately kind of ruins them a bit for me, because the original series was fine as it is, in my opinion. I would rather watch a bunch of guys being dudes in rubber ears and primary colors go around punching and kissing aliens sometimes at the same time than watch whatever this is. So this video is just going to be a very long rant about the parts of the original Star Trek that I love, yet I need to start off to talking about whatever this is. What my opinion really comes down to is that there is nothing I really despise more in movies than unnecessary grittiness. And I don't mean grittiness like you get when you watch, for example, a Quentin Tarantino movie. By the way, can you believe that Quentin Tarantino is rumored to be directing the next Star Trek movie, and it's gonna be R-rated? And because a Tarantino movie is gritty as a stylistic choice, and it's what Tarantino does. He does gritty movies. But you know what's not gritty? It's fucking Star Trek. I think the lighting is changing. There's a disturbance in the force. Wrong movie reference. The thing I hated the very most about the reboot movie is that they decide to suck the planet Vulcan into a black hole in the very first movie of the reboot, and also to have Spock's mom die to fulfill the dead mom trope. Like, it's not gonna make me like or feel more sympathetic towards Spock to know that his mom died. The mom that we never established any traits for or spent any time with. But you know what is gonna make me like Spock? Watching him interact with his friends, the crew. Can we get some of that? Oh wait, we can't, because he and Jim are mortal enemies. I just love that trope, where the two people who are best friends start out by literally choking each other. It's great. Watching the main characters bonding and genuinely appreciating one another, it's yawn. It's not despicable, right? No one wants that. I have a lot to say about the reboot, but I'm not gonna make yet another hot take on the Star Trek reboot. I'm sure there are just about 100,000 of them already on the YouTubes, so not today. So that's out of the way. How about that original series? Let me tell you something about its content and what you can expect from an episode. So there's basic info if you've never heard what a Star Trek is. So there's a bunch of people in the future, and they're flying around space. They were hired by a peaceful federation called the Federation? Trademark. And our team is made up of mostly humans. We have Captain Jim, we have Lieutenants Uhura and Sulu, we have Ensign Chekhov, we have Dr. McCoy, and Chief Engineer Scotty. And representing the non-human side of our team is Spock, a half-human, half-Vulcan. More on that later. I don't know how to make that more concise, so we're just gonna dive balls deep right from the get-go into what is, in my opinion, one of the best episodes. It's Amok Time from Season 2, so what I want to do is describe like a detailed summary of what happens in the episode, so that even a person who hasn't seen it will know why I love it so much. They open up with the Enterprise headed for a big, important official thing, whilst en route Spock is acting very irrationally irritated. Like, he's throwing soup around, he's punching the computers, he snaps at everyone, and so the crew is growing concerned. Jim, of course, asks him if he's okay, and a visibly not okay Spock says he's okay, but he needs to go to his home planet Vulcan ASAP. They divert to Vulcan because Spock is Jim's best friend, and he trusts that it's important enough to make the trip. Then Jim's boss sends a message that the big important official thing is being pushed up, so they need to get there faster. Jim orders the ship back to its original course. However, Spock is apparently sleepwalking and makes an order to divert back to Vulcan, but he doesn't remember doing it. Spooky. Jim redirects the ship back to its original course and scolds Spock, making him get a medical check. Bones concludes that Spock is physically healthy, but he'll explode from stress soon if he doesn't get to Vulcan. Jim has asked Spock what's wrong about 5 times now, but this time he's got his boss pressing them to go to the big important official thing, so they don't have time to divert to Vulcan, so Spock better spill the beans or else. So at this point, you, the audience, is like, what could it be that's making Spock so stressed out? Is there a Vulcan equivalent to a period, and is he having it? Is Spock secretly a werewolf, and the full moon is approaching somehow in space? Did he forget to return some library books, and he has just now checked the fee he owes the Vulcan library? We finally get our answer, when Spock tells Jim that he needs to go back to Vulcan urgently, because it's the Vulcan mating season.
What kind of biology?
Vulcan biology.
You mean the biology of Vulcans? Biology as in reproduction?
Yes. Spock is too horny to function.
There's no need to be embarrassed about it, Mr. Spock. It happens to the birds and the bees.
The birds and the bees are not Vulcans, Captain.
They really went there. Funny thing is, in that scene where Jim and Spock are awkwardly talking about the concept of dying of blue balls, and they're comparing the condition to, like, fictional alien animals, I remembered a factoid that is that ferrets actually are like this too. The female ferrets can die of overheating if they don't mate, and it's true. I saw it on QI. Then Jim's boss calls him up and angrily demands that he stays on course for the big important official thing, but Jim likes Spock more than his career, so he ignores that shit. More confusion arises when it turns out Spock has a wife, but she's actually his betrothed. But Spock calls her his wife, despite the fact that they aren't married yet. It's confusing, but Jim is just happy that he's going to be Spock's best man at the ceremony, where we meet T'Pring, Spock's fiancée wife. So the rules of farr, which is the name for that sex-crazed disease that Spock is going through, is that T'Pring and Spock are gonna tie the knot and consummate, and then they can all go back to their daily lives. Which is it's pretty awkward for Jimmy and Lenny over here witnessing their friend losing his virginity. However, Spock won't get off that easy. Because according to old Vulcan tradition, they let anyone who wants to speak their mind or forever hold their peace. And T'Pring's boyfriend, STUNNN, is there, so Spock has to fight him for the right to marry T'Pring. However, it's not that simple either, because T'Pring can choose who gets to fight Spock, and she chooses Jim. Jim knows that Spock is too exhausted from holding off nutting for so long to defeat that STUNNN guy.
Are you stunned?
So he sees it as a help to Spock if Jim accepts the fight and pretends to lose to him. But it's only after Jim has agreed to fight him that the referee tells him, oh, and by the way, it's a fight to the death. So Jim is not feeling entirely okay with his decision all of a sudden. While fighting, Jim invents the anime boob sweater by accident before Bones interjects and demands to give him a shot so he can stand a chance to fight in the hot Vulcan climate. This is a not-so-discreet way of Bones saving Jim's life by giving him a drug that will make him look like he's dead. so that Spock can win. That means Spock thinks he has choked Jim to death, and the second his bloodlust dies down, he realizes he has made a terrible mistake. Also, apparently rolling around in the dirt with Jim means that Spock isn't horny anymore. And he lets T'Pring marry that STUNNN guy.
Stun.
So it was all kind of pointless, wasn't it? Back at the ship, Spock thinks he has killed Jim, so he's standing there explaining to Bones that he's resigning from his position because he's now a murderer criminal. Then Jim makes his dramatic entrance and Spock smiles for the first time ever, and credits roll. Time for intermediate fun facts about Vulcan segment. 100% real fun facts. They all got their pointy ears from the goof shop. Almost all the guys sport that perfect bowl cut. They've got eyebrows that look like what my eyebrows looked like when I had eyebrows. Most of them are vegetarians, and they eat something called plomeek soup. We never do find out what it's made of, but I bet it's real fucking boring. It's probably beetroot. Just eats fucking Vulcan borscht. Also, if Spock eats either sugar or like a mint cake, he goes fucking ballistic and starts swimming with whales. Back to the regularly scheduled programming. Another episode I hold dear to my heart is called Journey to Babel, in which the Enterprise crew is partaking in a big important official event. It's not the same one as before, so it's another one. McCoy, Jim, and Spock are receiving the Vulcan ambassador Sarek and his wife Amanda. And as they're greeting them formally, it turns out they're Spock's parents. Jim in the audience is appalled at the weird level of privacy going on. Like, apparently Spock is a more private person than Ron Swanson. So much so that he completely failed to mention to his best friend before the big important official thing that his parents would be there. At the reception, Bones is probably having the best day of his life because he's mingling with Spock's embarrassing mom, who will absolutely talk to anybody about how Spock had a teddy bear dog as a kid.
A teddy bear?
And there's a free bar, so Bones is having a great time. But of course, trouble has to arise, because aboard the ship are tons of other alien representatives. And it turns out there's an assassin on the loose. Because a Tellarite, one of these ugly motherfuckers, that argued and threatened Sarek before at the reception got their neck snapped. But snapped in a way that is characteristic of Vulcan fighting techniques. Ooh. Also, there's an enemy ship in the distance that wants to be a dick about something. Then it turns out Spock's dad has had 3 heart attacks in secret and needs urgent surgery. At the same time, Jim is stabbed by the mystery assassin. Spock is the only other blood type match on the ship, so he'll have to donate his blood to his dad's surgery or he'll die. Bones has also never operated on a Vulcan heart before, which, by the way, is situated in the place where humans have their liver, and it also beats like 250 beats per minute, so Bones is gonna need more booze to keep cool. So, Spock has a choice to save his kind of a douche father's life, or remain at the helm and handle the enemy ship approaching. And wouldn't you fucking know it, Spock is ice cold, and he chooses the helm over his own father's life. His reasoning is that because Jim is in sickbay getting treated for his acute stabbing syndrome and that enemy ship is lurking outside, he can't hand over the command to Scotty because that's just too many things for an engineer to handle. But I think we all know Spock has been waiting for an excuse to let his father die as payback for his traumatic childhood. Amanda then slaps some sense into her son, but Spock literally won't do anything until he knows Jim is okay. So Jim decides to execute what is Plan G at this point, and pretends to Spock that he has made a miracle recovery from the stab wound in his lung, so that Spock will give his dad some blood. After standing around Spock like, yeah, I'm A-okay, ready to command a ship, trying to get him to leave with the intention of going back to bed after Spock has left for sickbay, Jim is then, of course, roped into staying at the helm because the enemy ship is stirring the shit pot at that moment. And so everything is going on at the same time. Bones is performing heart surgery while not knowing what he's doing. Spock has to be hypoed every 5 minutes to stay unconscious so he won't bail on his father's blood transplant. Jim is in danger of dying from standing up too long with a lung wound. The enemy ship is attacking. All we need is a woman giving birth and a timed bomb. All ends well. The attacking ship blows itself up. Sarek survives because of his son he never loved. Jim can finally recover from his open wound. Bones still doesn't know how he pulled off Vulcan heart surgery, but then again, he is very, very drunk.
Well, what do you know? I finally got the last word.
It's been a stressful but fulfilling day. One reason I love this episode is because it opened up a lot of Star Trek lore. One of the best examples, in my opinion, is this. So, this is the first episode where we see Spock's parents, and a funny bit of trivia is that Spock is definitely dying of embarrassment every single time he's seen in a room with his parents. In every scene they're together, Amanda and Sarek are like touching fingers like that, and in Vulcan culture that is the same as a kiss. So Spock has to stand around watching his parents making out Vulcan style in front of all his co-workers and pretend that he's just fine with it. Honorable mentions for really good episodes are basically all the ones where the gang has to dress up to blend into some other society. Usually it's Earth olden days stuff. I especially love the weird as fuck episode where a whole planet's culture is based off of the Chicago gangsters of the 1930s. So everyone's wearing ugly suits and toting machine guns and talking in a mob boss voice. And I don't even remember why they're down there. It's got something to do with the whole thing of these people having built their culture around a book on Al Capone that someone left behind after a mission. And that violates the Prime Directive, so they have to do something about that. But I'm just so distracted by Jim and Spock having to wear suits and fedoras and talk like mobsters. And Jim calls Spock Spocko, and he drives a car with stick shift, and it's catastrophically funny. I could watch Jim failing miserably at driving all day, every day. This is also why the new movies are crap, because I don't believe that shit for a second. Another good dress-up episode is one where Bones jumps through a time and space hole because he was accidentally stabbed with something that gave him rabies. So his actions that he has made in the time period that he jumped through the hole to get to alters the reality that Jim and the others live in, so that Starfleet doesn't exist anymore, and they can't beam aboard their ship because it isn't there. So Spock and Jim have to jump through the hole as well to find and stop Bones, and they end up in the Great Depression of the 1930-something. Best part is that they're horribly unprepared, and also the absolute worst at acting inconspicuous considering it's part of their job. For example, Jim has to explain to people why Spock's ears are like that, and the best he can come up with is that they were stretched by an automatic rice picker in a tragic rice picker accident. So Jim and Spock have to set up camp for a few weeks and also try and invent a machine that can look through the future's newspapers so that they can find out what it is that Bones fucked up so that they can stop it. The ending's kind of a bummer because Jim gets attached to a woman who it then turns out Bones saved from getting run over. And of course that has to be the thing that alters history and stops humans from ever achieving warp speed, apparently. So they have to let her die, and they return sulking, and the crew is all like, "What happened? You were gone for like 2 seconds." And the guys are like, "Everything happened." Another episode that's just pure fun is the one where they're on a paradise-like planet, and at first the indigenous people are like trying to kill them with these mechanized flowers, but then it turns out they're alright, and the natives are like immortal but dumb as shit, so they've forgotten how to procreate, and the Enterprise has to teach them to fuck. Also, remember the time Scotty got possessed by the ghost of Jack the Ripper and he starts murdering women? That really happened. That's just the kind of shit you can expect on Star Trek, and that's why I love it so much. You never know what's coming. I don't know how to end this video, but I wanted to do a little thing where I talk about how annoying I think it is that people don't know how to do the tile. I don't know. Because, like, what's the difficult part of doing this? And, I hear people complaining like, oh, I don't know how to, spread my fingers in this exact way. And I'm like, do you also have problems with spreading your fingers so you can make the Trekkies sign off? Well, fear no more, because you can just, go like this. You see? Easy solution. For 2 payments of $19.99, you too can learn how to do the ta'al today.
How does that Vulcan salute go? That hurts worse than the uniform.